All right, let's go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Don Cherry Grapevine podcast. This week, we're going to go back into the archives of the Don Cherry Grapevine television show with a 1983 interview that Dad did with Scotty Bowman. Now, this was taped in October of 1983, and Scotty Bowman was still coaching the Buffalo Sabres back then and had just come off his run with 5 Stanley Cups with the Montreal Canadiens before going to Buffalo. After the 1979 Stanley Cup, and that was the year that the Bruins, coached by Dad, and the Montreal Canadiens met in the semifinals, and it was the Game 7 Too Many Men on the Ice game. That after that, Dad left and he went to Colorado, and Scotty left and he went to Buffalo from Montreal. And before Dad signed a contract with the Colorado Rockies, Scotty called him up and said, look, why don't you come and be my assistant coach in Buffalo? Because at the time, Scotty was coach and GM, and I think kind of the idea that was going to be that Scotty was going to coach 1 or 2 years, and then Dad would take over and Scotty would be the general manager. Because unbeknownst to me, Dad and Scotty became pretty good friends during the 76 Canada Cup. And again, with this being 1983 interview, he had 5 Stanley Cups already with the Montreal Canadiens. Then Scotty went on from Buffalo to Pittsburgh and won in 92, and then went on to coach the Detroit Red Wings and won back-to-back Stanley Cups in 97, 98, and then 2002, and ending up with a total of 9 Stanley Cups as a coach, which is pretty amazing. Ralph Melly was the executive producer of the show at this time, and when Scotty came into the studio, he was kind of wearing a brown suit, and Dad joked saying, hey, Scotty, you wore the same suit that you did while coaching in Montreal. And just before the show, Ralph made Scotty change into a tuxedo and come out and kind of wanted to upstart Dad in his dress. So that was a pretty funny, and kind of took Dad by surprise. So here we go. The interview with Scotty Bowman and Dad in 1983.
Well, Blue, tonight in the Grapevine, we've got Scotty Bowman, Coach of the Year in the National Hockey League, Coach Team Canada, 4 Stanley Cups, and he leaves Montreal. I'm going to ask him why he left Montreal, and we'll do it on the Grapevine tonight. I love this dog. Let's go on the Grapevine. Jimmy, what's happening tonight?
I feel terrific tonight, Grape. Scotty Bowman. You know I love the guy. And boy, when you two guys were on Stanley Cup playoffs on the old television, what a show you put on together.
Well, those shows used to cost us a lot of money. $1,000 it cost me, we got fined. Scotty, now, Scotty's got to have the edge on everything, all the time. I remember one time he brought all the reporters in the dressing room, had them all there, and he's showing them the penalties the Bruins should have had. When I heard that, I went bananas. I'd do something bad in the papers. He'd do something. It turned into a circus. So what happened? John Ziegler called us in, and he's reaming us out. And when I'm getting a lecture, I always daydream. So I kind of look over, and there's Scotty, and I'm looking at him. This guy's probably going to beat me. I hate to say it, but look at him. He's got a blue suit on. I look down, and he's got brown wallabies. And I said to myself, is this guy that wears a blue suit and brown shoes going to beat me? And he did. And we got fined $1,000. Now, I know he got fined $1,000 for wearing brown shoes. What did I get fined for? But anyhow, Blue's got the great Blue movies, and she's going to show them on Scotty. Roll 'em, Blue.
Scotty Bowman's playing career was cut short by injury in junior hockey. So characteristically, he chose the next best option and became part of the Montreal management team until he moved into the expansion-created coaching job at St. Louis in 1968. Bowman patiently assembled the best team possible under less than favorable conditions, and the Blues fans were rewarded with trips to the finals of the Stanley Cup during each of their first 3 years in the league. His team's exciting performance, twice against Montreal powerhouses and once against the Big Bad Bruins, gained credibility for expansion and great admiration for this smart young coach. The Canadiens landed Bowman in 1971, and he inherited a team with a penchant for success. Scotty was up to the task, and his first cup came in 1973. During his tenure in Montreal, Canadian players won 3 Art Ross trophies, 8 Vezina trophies, 3 Conn Smythe trophies, 2 Hart trophies, 1 Norris, and 1 Calder trophy. In '77, Scotty was named Coach of the Year, but the best was yet to come. 4 straight Stanley Cups. Final series victories over Philadelphia in '76, Don Cherry's Bruins in '77 and again in '78, and the upstart New York Rangers in 1979. Bowman had assembled one of the greatest teams ever. And it was time to move on. In Buffalo, they needed a general manager and coach. The Sabres wanted a championship, someone to deliver the Stanley Cup dream. So they hired a champion, the man with the best winning percentage of all time, Scotty Bowman.
Breaks my heart.
Now, Grapes, I got a true story for you.
True? Are you sure? Cross your heart.
Gospel.
All right.
Now,
Go ahead.
I met Scotty a few times over the past few years. I used to live in Montreal, as you know.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Okay.
I was hired to do a comedy show on the 16th of March a few years ago, and I had to fly to Buffalo to get a connecting flight to Albany. So I'm there,
You
and
got all the big times, right?
yeah, all the big places. So anyhow, I see Scotty walking around, right? And I go over and shake hands with him, everything, say hi, and he says, I lost my luggage. Lost my luggage on that short flight, and he says, and all my suits were in it as well.
Wait a minute, he lost his clothes and that?
Yeah.
There's nothing lost, believe me.
Anyhow, Grapes, I gotta ask you this. Is it true that some of the players had fear and resent for Scotty?
Well, that's true. I used to know some of the guys in Montreal, but you know, he has a style where he keeps them on edge all the time. Now, Al Arbour's got a style. You know, he's calm, cool. My style, I was out with the guys, had a few beers with them and got them to win. But Scotty always kept them on edge. He's always keep them guessing all the time, so they always produce. And let's face it, he did pretty good, 4 Stanley Cups.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to be right back to talk him in the Grapevine. Don't you go away. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have the second greatest coach in the world, Scotty Bowman.
How's that?
Yeah, but you're not wearing your wallaby.
No. Who's the greatest coach?
Me.
Well, I'm the best dressed coach now.
Yeah, I tell you. Where's the brown wallabies?
No, they were from Finland, those shoes, you know. They weren't those hush puppies.
I knew they'd be Swede or Finns or something like that. Now listen, right off the bat, I'm going to ask you. By the way, you just look. Now, why don't you dress like that all the time? You just
I do.
Look great. Are you kidding? You got that Team Canada jacket you wear all the time. Anyhow, listen. Remember
Better those striped suits you wear.
Yeah, I know. Well,
That's what happened to
I'm
you.
a hitman.
Did you hear that?
What?
Oh, as soon as you started wearing those striped suits.
Fired?
Right
Down
out.
the pipe? Now you tell me. Too late. Remember the time a couple of years ago I put too many men on the ice? Remember?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, you
in the
fight,
playoff.
yeah.
It was in the playoff.
Now let me, no, seriously, did you see right off the bat he was on the ice right off the bat? Did you notice it?
I was so excited that I couldn't even count to 6 myself. And one of the players yelled, there's 7 guys on the ice. So we started yelling at the linesman. And of course, I think it was D'Amico, and they all caught it, really.
Yeah.
I felt bad about it.
I was going to say, did you feel sorry?
I really did. I was hoping we'd score, though, and tie the game up.
Yeah, and then get a penalty, eh? Yeah, I knew you felt sorry. For how long? 5 seconds?
Well, until we got into overtime, I guess. You know.
Now listen, you remember when we got that $1,000 fine? Remember that?
Oh, for the talking between games?
Yeah, and all that stuff. And I
You were
remember
showing.
Ziegler sent the letter. He says, Don, you and Scotty and the Boston Bruins put on a wonderful stirring finish with the finals. So it's deep regret I'm fining you $1,000.
No, I got,
Did you get
I got
that
a
too?
congratulations with a $1,000 fine.
Did the club pay it?
No, I paid it myself.
Oh, you lie.
Paid it myself.
You lie. You kidding? Harry made me
I was
pay.
just talking to Harry. He said, don't do anything now that, you know, incriminate me.
Oh,
so
don't say
I
nothing
couldn't
about
say
Harry?
much. But I got to talk to you. Last year, you know, in the playoffs when we had to play that matinee game.
Yeah.
And he phoned me up on Monday and
Yeah.
he said, can you play on
I loved
Wednesday?
it.
I said, no, we're playing Thursday and
I love
Friday.
it.
Well, he said, we may have to play in the afternoon. I said, good. We'll play good in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So anyways, we got to Boston. We won the first game. Second game, I was walking out about an hour before the game started, and the ushers were getting their pep talk from their leader. And as soon as I walked out, they started booing me. We had to take the afternoon off work and this, but they were only kidding. And I said, hey, you guys, the 2 most popular guys in Boston were Bobby Orr and Don Cherry. I said, Harry couldn't get along with them. How do you expect him to get along with me?
I like your style. I like it. All right. I bet they cheered. All right, now we got to get serious for a minute. 4 Stanley Cups, and you leave Montreal. Why?
Well, like anything else, Don, I think time was come to move on. They were going to have a board of 5. I think what it came down to, they asked me to report to Irving Grumman, who I never had a problem with, really. I mean, the year that we were together, he never bothered me, and I never bothered him, and we won our 4th cup. And it came down, I would have reported to Jean Beliveau. I figured that Jean Beliveau was a hockey man. He was not high profile, but I couldn't get involved with somebody who I didn't respect as a hockey man. I respect him as a businessman, and we went on and on and on, and the time was to move on. And I didn't care if we won 5 in a row. I just felt that the time was to leave, and everybody else was going. You'd already gone to Colorado. I wasn't going to have any more fun anyways in Montreal, so...
Why didn't you go 2 years earlier?
I went closer to Colorado. I went to Buffalo.
All right, yeah, I thought Team Canada, we were down there, and it was 76, and you know that organist down there? He says, if I ever leave Montreal, it's on account of that goofy organist. Remember that? He's the worst organist in the world.
And that was the series that I got into trouble when you gave Esposito the black sweater for practice.
Do you remember that? Tell that story.
Well, it's quite long to tell.
Well, that's all right. We're the Grapevine.
We were playing the Russians in Toronto, and we all decided that we wanted to get a little more speed. And unfortunately, the trainer, through some error, he just gave these guys the black sweaters. And, of course, Phil came up to Don and started asking him about this. He says, nothing to do with me. You better ask Scotty. So now Scotty comes... the airport. Now he's having a happy time. Phil goes up, you dirty rat. Remember that? What? I don't know anything going on here. I passed the buck like you were Harry there. That's how I passed the buck. There was Keith Allen, there was Sam Pollock, there was Don Cherry, Bobby Crom, Al McNeil. But let the train get off the track, and it was me.
I told him to go see you. I was getting back at you. Now listen, everybody...
But they must know about the famous goal that we beat Czechoslovakia.
No, I don't think they know, but you can tell them. I wish you would. We sort of rehearsed this.
Well, Don would come before the game, and he'd say, what do you want me to do tonight? And I said, well, just go up beside Sam and keep Sam, calm.
Under control.
And if he's got any messages, pass them down. And so we got into overtime. I think it was against Czechoslovakia. It was, and it was 4-4. And Al McNeil, I think, was with Don, and Bobby Crom was with me. And we got a message down from Don to say that the goalie Zarilla was really starting to come out. He was gambling. And he said, if we get a chance, we should tell the guys if they get a chance not to shoot because they're not going to score, just take a step on the side. And Darryl Sittler came down the ice, and the goalie came running out at him. And, as soon as he put it in, we all looked at Don and we started waving.
I was fired next year. All right, now they say that you're not close to the players and all that. You heard me, talk like that. Now, what's this all about? You're not close to the players.
Well, I don't think I'm that close, but I'm so well respected by them that I'm getting sued by one of them. No, I couldn't coach the way, I just couldn't do it that way. I felt that, especially, I guess when I got to Montreal. In St. Louis, it was a little different. We had older players, and I had my most fun in St. Louis. We never won. And I'll never forget one game, Don. We were playing in the 7th game against Minnesota in the West Division Final. And before the game, Glenn Hall, after the warm-up, he said, Coach, you better keep your eye on me. He did this all the time. He said, because I'm not moving.
He was sick before the game.
And so I was sicker. I was about 30 years old, and we're getting ready to play the game. And I go in, I look for Doug Harvey, and he's in the bathroom having a shave, about 10 to 8. And I said, Doug, I got to talk to you for a minute, and yeah, what's up? I said, well, Glenn just came to me, and he wants to know if we're sure we want him to play tonight. The other guy hadn't played the whole playoffs. And he says, in fact, he said, keep an eye on me tonight. So Doug says, well, I got news for him, Scotty. I'll keep 2 eyes on him. But he said, he's going to play. And we played that night, and we went into 2 periods of overtime. And Glenn Hall had 61 shots, let in 1. And Cesar Maniego had 55 and let in 2. It was the best goaling I can ever remember in a playoff series. We went into late in the second overtime before Ron Schock scored the winner.
Remember that game in overtime? You knew Orr was going to score that big goal.
Well, if anybody was going to score. In fact, in that series, we got, I think Plonk got hurt in the first game, and then we got into the last game. And I thought our team played pretty well in that last game. We were up 3-2, and finally we got a penalty. I think Johnny Busick tied it up, and it was a great goal. I mean, you see pictures of it.
Isn't that something?
You know,
that's the only goal you see all the time with Stanley Cup. Now look,
goal.
when you go to the Montreal in these drafts, I don't know what you do down there. You cast a spell out of them or something. You come out of players, you come out with drafts, first-round draft choices. How do you do it down there?
Well, you try to, look what you need. I think.
I see. I see it. The deal was closed at 3 o'clock in the morning. What do you
try
guys
to stay
get
up
drunk
as late
or
as I
something?
can. No, you work around the clock, and then finally you get somebody who's tired, and you beat him with a hammer, and you just look through his pockets. But no, you have to give value. I always feel that you give value.
Wait a minute.
Some teams want older players. They don't want to wait.
Korab for Housley?
Well, don't forget we did about 3 years without him.
I know, but Housley.
Well, he's a young kid, and we know he's going to be great. But you still, I told the Knoxes when I went there, I said, you've got a fair team, but it's getting old, and it's all getting old. They're all getting old at the same time, and unless you want to slide to the bottom, you're going to have to trade some of your favorite players. And the toughest part I've had in Buffalo is convincing the owners, because they're pretty close to the players, and they're nice people, and the players respect them, which makes a good combination. And when I went to Montreal, Mr. Selke, when I was very young, he told me, he said, 2 things never to fall in love with, he said, is racehorses and hockey players. And he said, if you don't like one, and don't try to like him. Once you make up your mind that you think the player is past his peak or is on his way down, then you should make the trade and make the best you can of it.
All right, you coached a lot of years against me, and I've never asked this before. What was my biggest weakness as a coach?
Besides adding up to 6, I don't think you had a weakness. I didn't like the...
I'm walking into these like you can't believe. Think I know better, wouldn't you?
Well, I think with those suits and all your clothes that you became the center of attraction.
I get it.
And I think the referees I was jealous myself, and I'm sure the referees were.
Well, they didn't like the Velvets.
Well, they said, he's buying too many clothes. Let's get him out of this series. He's going to make too much money and buy more.
You know what? You always get the edge. I know for a fact that Hockey Night in Canada, when you were playing us, you went to them and said, look, when Guy Lafleur's tired and I want a commercial rest, I'll go like this with your beepers. Put your beepers on. Why is it always you want the edge over everybody?
Well, no, we just had it figured out that every time we had a penalty situation, we had a power play, we wanted to get a rest. And we didn't tell them when to call it. We just said when the other team gets a penalty in the first period, we'd like to get our power play. So, I mean, I imagine the guy...
Is this guy something or what?
The guy probably was a good hockey fan, and he probably was a Canadian fan.
That's true. We were terrible. Now listen, you were Stanley Cup. You had a lot of Stanley Cups, and your son was born. And tell a story there, how you named him.
Well, in 1972, we had our first son, David, and then in '73, we won the Cup, and David is a handicapped child, so when the second one was born a year later and we were in the playoffs, I can always remember, because when you're involved, you think that there's nothing else like the playoffs.
You better believe it.
But more important to me was David.
Yeah.
And he wasn't doing very well at the time, and my wife was having a baby in about a month, and I said, if we do have a son, let's call him Stanley. So we called him Stanley, and I used to call him Stanley Cup till he was about 4 or 5 years old, and he used to believe me.
Oh, yeah, that is your name?
And one day I was on my farm, and I was going to get a license, and a guy met us, and I introduced my son Stanley, and we'd gone about 2 or 3 years without a cup, and after we got back in the truck, we drove back to the farm, and he said, Dad, is my name not Stanley Cup anymore?
Oh, not when you lose. I know what it's like. Yeah, I was in the finals so much when mine was born, I was going to name him Finals. Pretty good, eh? All right, Scotty, welcome back to the Grapevine. We've got a few questions from the crowd. Okay, go ahead, Ted.
Scotty, if we want to beat the Russians, what do we ideally have to do?
Well, we'd have to take about a month off our schedule and get ready for them rather than try to do it in a few days.
Can't do it in a few days. It's too tough. I know. We tried. Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, you and the Sabre Scouts, Scotty, what do you look for in a college player, a high school player, a junior player?
I'd say good character, excellent skating. That's the prime requisite, and of course that heart.
Yeah, heart like blue, Scotty. I'll tell you right now. Scotty, thanks so much for coming on the Grapevine. You look super. You look super. Does he look great? He looks super. All right, Ken Harris, take us home.
Okay, everybody, thanks for listening. We're going to continue with the coaching theme. And next week, we're either going to do Al Arbor, the 4-time Stanley Cup champ, coach of the New York Islanders and a teammate of Dad in Rochester's, or one of Dad's good friends, the late, great Pat Burns. And again, thanks very much for listening.